Hi, this is Cliff Bray. Today I'm going to build a display stand for this model Japanese seaplane that I just completed. I'll be using wood that was salvaged from the Belleville Biltmore Hotel in Clearwater, Florida. That was a very elegant hotel that stood for over 100 years. This particular piece of wood was used in the underflooring of that hotel, and its purpose was simply to support more elegant wood that the people actually walked on. And as you can see, it's very stained and marred and has nail holes and cracks. It was rough sawn, which means that the surfaces are not smooth at all. And that's because the workers never thought that anybody would ever view this piece of wood ever again once they put it in place as part of the underflooring. We're going to take advantage of these curves right here as we build the stand, because once you cut out the pieces for the stand and route an edge on them, those curves will be very dramatic and will enhance the beauty of the display stand. So we'll get started in kind of designing the shape of the stand, and I'll be back with you in just a few minutes after we complete that part of this project. Okay, so what I've done now is cut out these two shapes using construction paper. This one here will be the base of the stand, and then this shape here will be the vertical part of the stand. So it will look something like that when it's all done, with the seaplane sitting on top of the vertical part there. So I outlined those shapes on the board, again taking into account these curves and making sure I could include as many of those in the base as possible. And same thing for the vertical part of the stand. So we're all set now to cut out these pieces, and after I get through doing that, I'll be right back. Here are the two pieces of wood cut out from that larger piece of wood that I showed you. Again, how this will go together when it's all done will be, this piece will sit on top of the other one like that, kind of, like I showed you with those yellow cutouts. And then the seaplane will be perched kind of right up here, kind of like it's flying there, see? So, next step will be to sand down all of these rough areas here. And you'll be surprised at just how pretty the wood is underneath all of this this mess, all of this distressed area. Because again, this board for over 100 years remained hidden from sight as the underflooring at the Belleville Biltmore Hotel. I did notice that this area here is very distressed, much more than I thought, and we may wind up having to kind of cut that away and maybe bring this curve in more like this. We'll see. Yeah, but we'll see what it looks like once we sand it. You kind of get an idea by looking at the side here that's been cut away. You kind of see how pretty it kind of looks underneath here with the grain. And that same beauty there will be coming out when we sand down this top. You kind of get an idea by looking at this piece of the board that was cut away that, you know, there's not much beauty there in the side at all compared to what you can see now with this cut away. So we'll head outside, and we'll be using two sanders, a belt sander and a drum sander. And I'll show you those, and we'll get busy sanding. Outside now, there are the two pieces of wood we'll be sanding. We'll be using a 1-inch belt sander right there, and a drum sander with a variety of sizes of drums there we can put into the spindle. to match the different curves we'll be dealing with here today. And then we will also be using this larger belt sander here, 4 inches wide, for the top surface, and then the side surfaces of the vertical piece. So we'll go ahead and get started on all of that. It's always wise whenever you are sanding to use good protective gear. I recommend always using a respirator. The dust from these different types of wood can really mess up your lungs and irritate them for many days. And then a good pair of eye protection goggles there. And then a lot of times will wear a face shield there, something like that, especially if I'm routing a board in case the router bit comes apart or something. So with all of that said, we'll go ahead and sand down these 2 pieces of wood. We'll be sanding the top surface here, and we will sand the side surfaces here. Same thing here, both sides will be sanded, and then this interior area here, and then this back area will be sanding. And we'll shape this very smoothly as well as we do it. And as I said in the last segment, we'll evaluate after we sand if we can still keep this kind of a distressed area there or not, or have to discard it. So I'll get started on that, and we'll be back inside looking at those 2 pieces after I'm done. Back inside now. Here are the 2 pieces of the stand after they've been sanded. You can see quite a difference in the way this surface looks now on both pieces. Also sanded the edges here, so this is nice and smooth here. All these curves, where before, if you look at the last segment, this was very rough and jagged here from the bandsaw cutting. Well pleased with how this all came out. This distressed area over here that I was kind of worried about, I had to sand it down quite a bit, but it will be able to be used. I was afraid I was going to have to cut it out with a curve more, along here maybe, but it'll work out just fine. Yeah. This area here, it almost looks like a stain or something. It's just part of the wood grain. It's just part of nature. And we'll see how that looks once it's all finished. Sometimes, you think, golly, looks like it's kind of mottled there or something, but when you finish it, it really comes out looking really nice. Sides here look very good. You can really see how these curves in the grain look. When you cut a curve, in the top here like that, it causes these curves to warp even more. Very nice there. Couple of nail holes still here and here. Those will be covered up when the vertical part goes on. But it's always kind of interesting to think about a workman driving the nails in this particular board back over 100 years ago, never thinking that anybody would ever come along and pull that board up and then refinish it to be a stand for a model airplane. But that's what happened. And it's kind of like those nail holes are the evidence of this piece of wood's heritage as being part of the underflooring of the Belleville Biltmore Hotel. You can really tell the contrast in the way the wood used to look by taking this piece here. If you go back and look at the last segment, this is how this fit in. They're just kind of like that there. And you can really tell the difference after you finished off and sanded off all of this mess here in distressed areas, how pretty it looks underneath. Quite a surprise that no one would ever think. They would just see a board like this and just throw it away, where in reality all of this beauty does lie underneath there. Again, when it's put together, the vertical piece here will go right about there. And that's kind of get a little bit better idea of what this stand is going to look like now. with the C-plane. We'll perch on top there, about like that, yeah. I will probably cut a V-shape wedge in the top here of the vertical part of the stand, because the bottom of the seaplane float there is kind of V-shaped, as you can see right there. Yeah, so cut kind of a V wedge right there, and that seaplane float should fit right into there real good. And then I can probably secure it to the top of the stands with a screw going in from the bottom here. So next step will be to route an edge all the way around here, curved edge. I'll do the same on the outer curves here, just to kind of smooth and round those off. And we'll go outside and I'll talk a little bit more about that routing step. And then the only thing left after that really will be to hand sand it down a little bit more and attach this to the base. Probably do that with some screws. And then we'll put some kind of a finish on there as well. But more on that later. Outside now, we're going to route an edge on the two pieces of the model airplane stand, the first being the base, and we will route a curved edge, kind of S-shaped, along the entire perimeter here of the base. And when that's done, it will, dig into these curved lines and make them even more dramatic as they warp and move and everything, due to the curved edge we'll be putting on there. We'll be using a Roman Ogi bit. There it is. Right there, you can kind of see the curved pattern there that the bit will cut into the side of the base. After we're done with that, we will put a curved edge on the vertical part of the stand here. But this will not be an S-shaped curve. It will be just a curve right there, 90-degree type curve all the way up and down there, and all the way up and down the other side. And then I will probably go ahead and put a little bit of a curved edge here, just to kind of smooth all that out on both sides. All right, so we'll get started on that part of the project here. Always wear your protective gear when you're routing, sanding too, and sawing as well. But definitely whenever you're routing an edge on there, because that bit spins at a very high RPM and it's throwing small pieces of wood all over the place. And there is always the possibility that that bit, or the bearings in that bit mainly, could come apart and throw out a small piece of metal and hit you in the face or the eye. So always wear good safety goggles. I also augment that with a face shield there. And I always recommend, again, whether you're sanding or sawing or whatever, to wear a respirator, because sawdust can irritate your lungs quite a bit. And even if you aren't susceptible to the sawdust irritating your lungs, I'll tell you what, it just makes life so easy wearing that respirator, because you just don't have to keep moving back and everything away from all the sawdust in the air. So highly recommend wearing that respirator as well. So we'll go ahead and route those edges on, and then I'll take you back inside and we'll take a look at the results. Back inside, I've completed routing the edges on the two pieces of the model stand. It came out very, very good. You can see the S shape there on this piece. You can really see how routing that edge in there caused all of the curves to really warp and turn out to be, very dramatic in how they are shaped. Of course, very unique also. I mean, no other piece of wood in the entire world, once finished, happens to look exactly like this particular one here. Could be similar, but there'll never be any two that are completely identical. So this piece turned out very nice, yeah. Then for the vertical piece here, again, all I did there was just put a slight rounded edge there. Not that S-shaped edge, but it came out very, very well as well. Again, you can see here how the just cutting that very slight curve there, curved edge, caused the lines of the grain to really turn and warp very, very dramatically. Yeah. So, here's what's going to happen now. I'm going to put a pre-stain on both of these pieces. And then after that pre-stain has set for a while and soaked in, which is something that is really necessary with woods like pine, so you don't get kind of a splotchy finish when you put the stain on there. Then I'm going to use a red mahogany stain, and that will darken the overall wood quite a bit, which is kind of what I want. I think it'll look better with the seaplane there if the stand is a little bit darker in color. But that can be adjusted depending on how much stain you use and what color stain you use. But that'll be the next step. So I'll go ahead and put the pre-stain on and then the stain itself. And then we'll pretty much be ready to wrap this project up by simply attaching the vertical part of the stand here to the base. And then attaching the seaplane on top of the stand, about like that. Yeah. Okay, I'll be back in just a few minutes and show you the final results. Here is the finished product with the seaplane mounted on the stand. I used a red mahogany stain and put just enough on there to darken the wood, and made sure to keep all of the grain there. Very dramatic with all these curves there. You don't want to put too much stain on there, or you'll just make it into just a big kind of brown surface. It looks like maybe it was just painted or something. Other side here. A little view of the vertical on there. The seaplane is a Japanese F1 M2. Japanese made about 944 of those for use in World War II, starting in 1936, but these planes were used throughout the entirety of World War II, all the way up through 1945. They were manned by a two-person crew, a pilot and a gunner and spotter, and radio operator. And they would usually be positioned onto a cruiser or a battleship and lowered into the ocean on a crane, and then they would take off and go out and search for the American fleet. And once they found the American fleet, they would radio back to the Japanese fleet the location so the Japanese could maneuver their fleet for attack. The planes flew all by themselves. They didn't fly in formation, so it was kind of a dangerous mission to fly hundreds of miles away from the ship that you departed and hope that you could find your way back there, and that you wouldn't have any engine problems because there was nobody there to know where you went down or to come rescue you from the ocean if you had to ditch at sea. There was always the chance that you might be attacked by enemy aircraft, and these planes would stand no chance against modern aircraft the United States had on its carrier fleet, such as the Corsair or the Avenger. It was a difficult mission for the two-man crew, and many of them perished at sea, either by ditching and getting into a life raft and just dying at sea because no one could find them, or crashing into the ocean, either by being shot down or developing mechanical problems as well. Here is a picture of the F-1M2 in flight during World War II. They also were used on seaplane carriers, such as this one here, where they had multiple spotter seaplanes that they could launch. You can see a catapult right there that one of those is resting on, but they also would use these cranes to lower them into the water. Sadly, not very many of them remain. The ones that do are in museums. This particular one, of course, is at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, which holds hundreds and hundreds of F-1M2s, as well as their crew members. I said when I started this that the wood for the model airplane stand came from the Bellevue Biltmore Hotel. Here is a picture of the hotel before it was demolished. It was built in 1897 by Henry Plant, a railroad tycoon that used the hotel to bring tourists down to Florida. There was really no tourist industry very much back then, and to support his railroad as well. It was nearly 500,000 square feet at the time of its demolition, with parts added to it over the years. The older parts having these chimneys, and the newer wings do not. And then there were these flat roofed parts that held dining facilities and ballrooms and things. Many famous people stayed there. Many presidents: Barack Obama, George Bush, Jimmy Carter, Gerald Ford, Margaret Thatcher stayed there. Joe DiMaggio and Babe Ruth both stayed there. Thomas Edison and Henry Ford. Joan Baez and Bob Dylan used it to practice for their nationwide tour. Were there for quite a while as residents. Here's a photo of it as it was being built. At the time, it was the largest occupied wood building in the entire world. Quite a feat. It's a photograph of it right after it was finished, at least this part of it. Many postcards were made of the hotel, most of them from 1950s motif, showing the grounds as well. A different time. It was one of the grand hotels of America, which only about a dozen of those still exist. It was the last grand hotel in Florida that was being used as a hotel before its demolition. Some of the grand hotels in Florida's structures still exist, but they are not being used as hotels anymore. Another postcard from earlier days by looking at the cars there depicted. As I said, the wood for the model airplane stand came from the underflooring of the Bellevue Biltmore Hotel, and it held up the more luxurious wood you see in this photograph. It was highly polished in its day, but the underflooring was hidden from sight for 118 years until it was taken back up during demolition and saved, along with a lot of the other facilities and structures of the Bellevue Biltmore Hotel. But it'll be, that particular piece of wood will be displayed now, people will be able to see it. In fact, we should just go back real quick and take a look at what everything kind of looked like when we first started this project. Here's a photograph of the wood before I cut out the base and vertical stand. This area right in here, you look at how that grain all goes. That's this area right here. And of course the vertical stand there is right there. So it came a long way. If you remember, after we sanded this off, it was very light in color compared to the way it looks now. But I always find it interesting to go back and look at these photographs as to how things all started out. So with that, I'll go ahead and end this this video. Hopefully it gave you some tips on how to make a model airplane stand out of reclaimed wood, and some of the considerations on kind of where you pick where to cut into the wood depending on the grain of the wood. So you do produce these dramatic curves here when you route a curved edge onto the base. I wish you best of luck with any future wood projects that you have planned.